In a quiet town nestled between two mountains, there was an old radio shop owned by a man named Henry Carter. He was a retired engineer, known for repairing antique radios and vintage electronics. People often joke that Henry could talk to the past with those dusty machines. But what nobody knew was, he actually did. One evening, Henry found an old radio in a box marked unclaimed. The label on the back was almost rubbed off, but one word stood out clearly: Gateway. Curious, he cleaned it up, rewired the circuits, and plugged it in. Static buzzed loudly through the speakers. He adjusted the dial carefully. Then suddenly a voice. "Can you hear me?" Startled, Henry leaned closer. The voice sounded far away, like it was underwater, or underground. At first, he thought it was a radio drama, but no channel was broadcasting. The voice came again. "Henry, it's me, Alice." Henry froze. Alice was his wife. She had died 15 years ago in a car accident. "How is this possible?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "There's a crack between worlds, Henry." Alice's voice replied, "You fix the radio that opens it." That night, they talked for hours. Alice told him about the other side, a world similar to theirs but covered in fog, shadows, and silence. Time worked differently there. Spirits roamed, some peaceful, some angry, some still unaware they were even dead. Over the next few days, Henry stayed inside, speaking to Alice through the radio every night. He asked questions, cried, laughed, and even played their favorite song. But as the days passed, Alice's voice started to change. It grew deeper, slower, distorted. One night, when Henry tuned in, a different voice answered. "She's gone now. I am what's left." Henry recoiled in horror. The voice wasn't Alice's. It was something else, something pretending to be her. "What do you want?" he asked. "The door is open, Henry. We want in." The radio sparked violently. The lights in the shop flickered. A cold wind filled the room. Henry tried to unplug the radio, but the plug wouldn't budge. The voice spoke again, louder this time. "You invited us. You listened. Now it's your turn." The next morning, the townspeople found Henry's shop abandoned. The radio still sat on the counter, softly crackling. No one ever saw Henry Carter again. But sometimes at midnight, if you walk past the shop and listen closely, you'll hear a voice whisper through the static. "Can you hear me?" Voices from the other side. Part 2. The static never dies. The radio crackled softly on the counter of the abandoned shop. Dust settled like a blanket over everything, and the open sign still swayed slightly in the wind. But no one had gone inside since Henry Carter vanished. No one except Eli. Eli was a curious 14-year-old boy who lived down the street. He had heard the rumors, the whispers about the haunted radio, about Henry disappearing without a trace. Everyone said it was cursed, but Eli didn't believe in curses. One rainy evening, he slipped through the broken back door of the radio shop. The air inside was cold, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. The shelves were covered in cobwebs, and the only thing untouched was that strange, old radio sitting on the counter. As he reached for it, the static grew louder, not through the speaker, but in his head. "Can you hear me? Help, please. Don't trust the voices." Eli froze. The voice sounded like multiple people whispering at once. Some desperate, some angry, some laughing. He gripped the dial and turned it slowly. Then, just like before, a clear voice emerged. "You shouldn't be here, Eli." He jumped back. "How do you know my name?" "We know all the names of those who listen." The lights flickered. The radio pulsed red. Not just light, a glow, alive and breathing. Suddenly, the shop around him began to change. The walls cracked. The shelves melted into shadow, and outside the windows, only darkness remained. He was no longer in the shop. Eli had crossed over. The world beyond. The other side was cold and silent. The sky was gray and unmoving. Buildings floated in the distance like islands, connected by crumbling stone bridges. Shadows moved without shapes, and from every corner, voices whispered in echoes. Find the gateway. He brought them here. Henry Carter never left. Eli wandered through this ghostly world, until he saw a figure sitting on a bench near a flickering street lamp. It was Henry. He looked older, tired, but very much alive. When he saw Eli, he stood up slowly. "You turned the dial, didn't you?" Henry said, his voice raspy. "I just wanted to see if it was real." Eli replied, "It's real, and now we're trapped. Both of us." Henry explained that the radio wasn't just a communication device. It was a door, one built by accident when he combined parts from different eras. Somehow, it tuned into frequencies of lost souls, those stuck between death and peace. Some wanted help, but some wanted escape. "There's still a way out," Henry said, handing Eli an old metal key. "But only one of us can leave. You have to decide." The final frequency. Back in the real world, Eli's body stood frozen in the shop, eyes wide, whispering to no one. In the other world, Eli looked at the key in his hand. Henry stood beside him, silent. "Use it," Henry said. "Save yourself." But then a sound echoed in the air, Alice's voice. He lied. Eli. He wasn't trapped. He opened the door for them. Henry's face changed. His eyes turned black. The world around them shook. "You shouldn't have listened." Henry growled. "Now you'll stay forever." Eli ran. He ran across broken bridges, past screaming shadows, as the world collapsed behind him. At the last moment, he found the door, an old wooden one glowing faintly, locked tight. He jammed the key into the lock. A blinding light exploded. Back to silence. Eli gasped and fell to ground in the real-world radio shop. The radio had burned to ashes. Everything was still. He had returned. But something had come back with him. That night, Eli's mother heard strange whispers coming from his room. When she opened the door, Eli was sitting on his bed, staring at the wall, eyes blank. The radio was gone, but in the silence of the room, static still buzzed faintly. And somewhere deep in that static, Henry Carter's voice whispered, "Can you hear me now?" Voices from the other side. Part 3. The return signal. The radio was gone, burned into ash. But the voices, they had found a new home. Eli sat frozen on his bed. His eyes stared at the wall, unblinking, while a strange hum echoed softly around the room. His mother had tried shaking him, calling him, crying, but he wouldn't speak. He wouldn't move. Then, one night, he finally turned his head toward the corner of the room and whispered, "He's coming." His mother backed away slowly, fear growing in her chest. She didn't know what he meant, but Eli did, because Henry Carter had returned, the man in the static. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the air in Eli's room grew cold. The hum grew louder. The shadows stretched longer. And then the lights flickered. In the corner, where the light barely reached, a shape began to form. A tall, flickering figure, half man, half static, stood watching Eli. His face was blurry, but the voice was familiar. "You left me behind, Eli." Eli trembled. "You tried to trap me." "No," the voice whispered. "I tried to save you, but now we're both trapped." Henry reached out, his hand made of smoke and light. "Help me open the gate fully. Together, we can finish what I started." Eli shook his head. "No, you open the door for them. You're the reason they're here." Henry's face twisted, his static form pulsing with anger. "You don't understand what I gave up. I had to bring them. They promised me Alice." Suddenly, dozens of whispering voices filled the room, crawling over the walls like insects. "Let us in! Let us in! Let us in!" Eli screamed. The Journal of Secrets. Far across town, an old woman named Clara Jennings sat at her dusty desk. Her hands trembled as she flipped through a cracked leather journal. It was Henry's, left in her care years ago. She had ignored it for decades, thinking his obsession with frequencies and the afterlife was madness. But after seeing Eli's name in the newspaper, she knew the truth. Henry succeeded, and now it was happening again. She read the final page. The radio was never mine. I found it buried beneath the chapel ruins, with a symbol I'd never seen before. It wasn't human. Clara's heart pounded. They speak through sound. They ride frequencies. The radio was only a tool, a key, and I turned it. She knew what had to be done, the sound that shouldn't exist. Eli's body had become a receiver, a living bridge between two worlds. At night, he would speak in strange languages. During the day, he'd draw strange symbols on the walls. The house became cold. Pets ran away. Neighbors avoided even looking at the windows. Eli's mother begged for help. And one day, Clara came. With her came a device, a small silver box with spinning gears, a red glowing tube, and a dish covered in wires. "This is a frequency disruptor," she explained, "built to detect unnatural waves." She placed it near Eli. The device began to spin wildly. The red tube turned violet. "He's not alone in there," Clara whispered. Then, from Eli's mouth, another voice spoke. It was deep, ancient, and not human. "We were invited. We will not leave." Clara pressed a button. The disruptor screamed with sound. Eli convulsed and screamed. The walls of the house shook. Lights burst. Then silence. Eli collapsed. But it wasn't over. That night, Clara sat alone, reading more of Henry's notes. One phrase repeated over and over at the end of the journal. The source is still out there. The original radio. Buried. Waiting. The next morning, Clara and Eli went to the chapel ruins mentioned in the journal, an abandoned site outside town, forgotten by most. They dug near the altar, where the stone was cracked, and there they found it, an old, black box covered in dust and rust, wires sprouting like veins, a speaker carved with strange symbols, a dial marked only with symbols, not numbers. As soon as Eli touched it, the wind stopped, the air became heavy, and the box whispered, "We never left." Clara looked at Eli. This is the original gateway." Eli nodded. "Then it has to be destroyed." But as they prepared to smash it, the box pulsed with light. A voice screamed through the air, and something began to climb out. Voices from the other side. Part 4. The thing that came through. The earth trembled. Clara and Eli stumbled backward as the black radio pulsed with violet-red light. The speaker cracked open like a shell, and from within, something moved. It wasn't a creature. Not yet. It was sound first. Waves of screaming static, like 1,000 voices crying all at once. Then the shadows thickened around it, shaping into limbs, claws, and a face that never stayed the same. Henry's face. Then Alice's. Then Eli's own. And then nothing human at all. "You opened the gate," it hissed. "Now you belong to us." Eli stood his ground. "I'm not afraid of you." Clara grabbed the silver disruptor and aimed it at the creature. "You have no place in this world." She turned the dial to its highest frequency. The air screamed. Birds fell from the sky. The radio box cracked further as the creature howled in pain. But it didn't retreat. "You think we came alone?" it growled. Behind them, more radios hidden in the chapel ruins began to vibrate. Static spilled out of the cracks in the earth. The veil between worlds was ripping. The dead frequency. Eli fell to his knees. Inside his head, the voices came rushing back. But one voice rose above them all. Soft, clear, familiar. "You can end this, Eli, but you must go back." It was Alice. "You must go to the core, the tower and the in-between. Break the source. Close the path." Clara heard Eli whisper something, eyes glowing faintly. The tower in the gray world. He was leaving again. Before Clara could stop him, Eli touched the broken gateway radio and vanished into the void. The Tower of Echoes. Eli stood once again in the in-between world, the place between life and death. The sky above was colorless. The fog curled like fingers. In the distance stood a tower, impossibly tall and built of twisted metal, bone, and wires. It pulsed like a heartbeat. As he walked toward it, souls surrounded him, lost, broken, whispering. Some screamed for help. Some begged for silence. Some followed him silently. When he reached the tower, the gates opened with a whisper. "The receiver has returned." Inside was a throne made of broken radios, and on it sat a shifting shadow, its face constantly changing, showing every person who had ever listened. It spoke with all their voices. "You could be one of us, Eli. a keeper of gates, a guide of the dead. Why resist? Eli raised a disruptor, now glowing with both Clara's and Alice's symbols. Because I am not your gateway. He slammed it into the tower's heart. Collapse of the frequencies. The tower screamed, not in sound, but in memory. Eli felt every soul that had been trapped, every person who had turned the dial, all released at once like wind from 1,000 lungs. The ground cracked. The sky shattered like glass. The last thing Eli heard was Alice whispering, "Thank you," and then darkness, back in the world. Clara opened her eyes, lying next to the shattered ruins of the chapel. The black box was gone. Eli was lying still but breathing, peacefully. When he awoke, his eyes were calm. The voices were gone. "Is it over?" Clara asked. Eli nodded. The source is broken. For the first time in years, the town was truly silent. Final scene. The signal never dies. But far away in a forgotten part of the world, a radio crackled. A hand, old bony, turned its dial. The static returned, and a child's voice whispered through the speaker, "Can you hear me now?" Voices from the other side. Part 5. The last transmission. Months passed. The town returned to silence. Radios no longer crackled in the middle of the night. No more flickering lights. No more whispers behind mirrors. Eli lived a quiet life now. He smiled again, went to school, laughed with his mother. But deep down, he knew it wasn't over. Something had changed inside him. He could still hear faint echoes, not evil, not loud, just memories, fragments of voices, thanking him. One evening, while sitting by the window, Clara arrived with something in her hands. "It was mailed to me anonymously," she said, "with your name on it." Eli opened the package slowly. Inside was a cassette tape, unmarked, and an old Walkman-style player. He hesitated, then pressed play. The tape hissed for a few seconds. Then came a voice. "Alice." "Eli, if you're hearing this, it means the seal didn't hold forever. There's one final frequency, one last transmission. The underground broadcast." Alice explained how, years before, Henry Carter had recorded one final emergency signal, a backup plan, hidden deep within abandoned radio stations around the world. If activated, it would reopen the gateway, for good, and someone was trying to find it. "You must stop the broadcast, Eli," Alice said. "You're the only one left who can." Clara and Eli traced the signal to a location deep beneath the old regional broadcasting tower, buried under concrete and forgotten tunnels. When they arrived, they found rows of dusty equipment still glowing, powered by something not of this world. At the center of the room sat an ancient machine, and standing in front of it was Henry Carter, the final choice. But this Henry was not a ghost. He was alive, rebuilt by the static half machine, half man. "Eli, you don't understand. I'm saving the world. This signal doesn't bring death. It brings rebirth." He pointed to the machine pulsing behind him. "The dead deserve a voice. I'll give them a new world." Eli stepped forward, heart racing. "They don't belong here." "And who are you to decide that?" Henry's voice crackled like static. Clara pulled out the frequency disruptor. Henry smiled. "That won't work on me anymore." Suddenly, the machine activated. Alarms rang. A worldwide broadcast had begun. All radios across the globe lit up. TVs turned to static. People everywhere heard a deep, inhuman hum. "We are coming." Eli made his choice. He ran to the control panel, ripped open the wires, and connected the disruptor directly into the power source. "I won't let you bring them back," he shouted. Henry lunged toward him, but Clara jumped in the way. "Finish it," she screamed. Eli pressed the final button. The end of the signal. A massive burst of white light filled the room. The signal collapsed. Every radio in the world went silent. The shadow realm, the in-between, began to crumble forever. Henry's body disintegrated, his voice fading into static one last time. "Tell Alice, I'm sorry." Eli and Clara woke up outside the tower. The machine was gone. The underground chamber had vanished. 1 year later, Eli no longer hears voices. He lives a peaceful life, writes stories, helps others who've lost someone, giving them hope, not horror, but in a box on his desk. He keeps the broken cassette player just in case. And on some nights, when the wind is just right, he hears a soft whisper from far away. "Thank you, Eli. The world is quiet now because of you.